She spent nearly 20 years living, dressing, and acting just like a man, including living an intimate relationship with a woman. She always said she was born that way. That was until God told her she could be born again. Her story next on Significant Insights. Hello and welcome to Significant Insights. I'm Jerry Rose. You know, these days there are probably really not more issues more controversial, especially in the church, than those involving homosexuality. Our culture is pushing for an embrace of that lifestyle in every area of life, and a lot of Christians and some denominations are following suit. One example is the recent closing of the ministry of Exodus International after nearly 4 decades. Exodus was primarily a ministry for those dealing with same-sex attractions. And in the press release announcing its shutdown, board member Tony Moore said, "We're not negating the ways God used Exodus to positively affect thousands of people. But a new generation of Christians is looking for change and they want to be heard." Linda Jernigan also wants her story to be heard because you won't hear it in the mainstream media. And as you'll see in her interview with Greg Bogdan, growing up, she felt different, and as an adult, she attributed that difference to being gay. But embracing homosexuality did not bring Linda the peace and happiness that she sought.
My childhood was very different. It wasn't the typical, stereotypical childhood that a young girl would go through. My mom died when I was 3 weeks old. My biological father gave me away to live with my maternal aunt and uncle. He kept the other 7 children, but I was raised in a house with my aunt and my uncle and their 5 children. And so by being in their house, I had this thing where I just felt different because I felt like the oddball or the odd child out because all of them had the same last name. All of them looked alike, and it made me feel ostracized and just made me feel different. So childhood was a very different and a very unique experience for me.
Do you consider it to be, a positive childhood?
No, I wouldn't say that it was exactly positive. As I said, my mom died when I was 3 weeks old, and so my dad gave me away, so I knew of him, but I really did not know him as a father. I would see him periodically, and then the mom and the dad that I did know, that I grew up calling mom and dad, that took me to church every Sunday, that took me to Bible class, taught me Sunday school verses, and I sang in the choir at the church, helped me with homework and things of that nature. It was that dad who was the deacon at the church that ended up molesting me when I was 13 years old. And so the day that he molested me is the day that I was put out of the house, and then I had to go and move in with an uncle, another uncle and his wife. And so childhood for me was not a very positive experience. It was filled with disappointments and hurts, primarily by people who are supposed to love you and protect you and take care of you. So no, I wouldn't say that it was a very positive experience.
So in your childhood, you grew up, good grades, good student, and then your uncle, or your father at the time, father figure, molested you. What did that do to you?
Wow, it absolutely devastated me. If you would look at my grade school records, I was an honor roll student. I was involved in all kind of plays and dramas, not just at school, but also at the church. I was a happy-go-lucky kid with average kid problems. You know, did I eat the cookie? No. But overall, I was very happy-go-lucky. I was a student that was expected to excel in life. But then when I was molested, the very next year, I was an F student. Wow. I was withdrawn. I was drinking alcohol. I was not obeying parents anymore. I was not coming in at the time I was supposed to come in. I was in 100% rebellion, didn't want to listen to anyone. And I said that anyone who was paying any attention would be able to see the drastic difference between how I achieved in 7th grade versus how things was in 8th grade. It was a 360-degree turnaround, and the only change that we can point to is I was molested by my uncle, and I was put out of the house. I was removed from the family that I knew as my family, my mom and my dad, and shuffled around again for something that was not my fault, but because my dad, who was supposed to be my dad, molested me.
Do you believe that that could have possibly played into your homosexuality?
I believe it played a big role into my homosexuality because it built up an anger towards men.
Right.
It made me not trust men. It made me afraid of men, that men would overpower me, that men would take my weakness and use it against me. And so I was terrified, not just of him, I was terrified of my other uncles. You know,
right.
And my other uncles were nice, you know, but I would be terrified even to be around them because of what this man did. And so I had a deep hatred for men, which could have been the thing to push me into lesbianism because I didn't want to be with men.
You state quite often, I think, that there was something that you did feel different when you were growing up.
Yes.
Can you explain what different means?
Well, I felt different. At the time, I used to equate that difference that I was born a homosexual because I felt different. I didn't feel like everyone else. I wasn't like the typical girl who would play with dolls or doll houses and have tea parties. I didn't like barrettes and ribbons and things that other young girls like. And so I felt different. And I equated that difference to me being a tomboy, so maybe I was gay and maybe I was just born that way, and I have never really been an actual girl, a normal girl like other people. But now I know better. Now I have the revelation that my difference that I felt was an average difference for someone who lived in the house with people who were not their biological parents, living with someone who's not their sisters and their brothers, they're not their actual siblings, that there would be a difference. But because of who Satan is, he did not highlight that part to me. He just came in and jumped on the fact that I felt different, and then the homosexual community began to define me as homosexual because I stated that I had a difference.
Right. Now, you were introduced to homosexuality at like 13, is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Was that your first experience sexually in general
Yes.
as well? Okay.
Yes. Before, when I was with this young lady, like I said, I was very rebellious, you know. I became very rebellious. My family said, hey, you know, we need to try to get her some help. And so they introduced me to this young lady at our church who was supposed to be a mentor of mine. And she did do some mentoring of me. But that didn't last long. She had an agenda. I now can see that the mentoring that she was doing of me was actually her grooming process, was to get me to trust her, to get me to let my guards down, and then she began to hold sexually explicit conversations with me. She began to tell me about her sexual experiences. I hadn't had any, and so apart from being fondled when I was molested and all of that, I hadn't had any sexual experiences. And so I was intrigued by her sexual activities, and so then she began to ask me questions like, what if she would kiss me? Would I tell anyone? What if she and I would do anything? Would I be able to hold a secret? And so by this time I had such trust in her that I trusted everything she said, and I was willing and ready to do whatever she wanted me to do.
Now, you say you got rebellious. How rebellious did you get? Did you get into drugs and drinking? You know, what was rebellion for you?
Rebellion for me was disobedience. I didn't take instructions very well. I did get into alcohol. I was an alcoholic. I was a functional alcoholic. I was able to drink and still go to work, drink and still go to school, but I still drank way too much. I did get into drugs. I got into marijuana. I got into cocaine. So I was smoking cocaine, sniffing cocaine, as well as drinking, partying all night, spending all my money. Just lived my life according to my own standards. Anything I wanted to do, that's what I did, and no one can tell me any different.
How old would you say you were when you finally decided you were a lesbian?
Well, because I always equated this difference that I felt. You know, I just felt different all of my life. And so before salvation, I would have said that I knew I was gay from the day I was born. I was one of those homosexuals who proudly will proclaim that I was born a homosexual. So there's nothing you can tell me, You know, there's nothing anyone can say to me. I know that I was born a homosexual, and the reason why I knew was because I always felt different.
Now, do you believe you're born homosexual today?
No, I don't believe that I was born a homosexual today. I believe that I was created in the image of God and after his likeness, and he designed for me to be a woman, and that's what I am.
When we return, Linda continues a story, and she talks about taking on, then shedding the male persona that she had created for herself. We'll be right back.
The words that I heard was, "But you can be born again." And that was something that changed my whole worldview and my whole paradigm about this is not a sentence that I need to take to the grave with me. You know, this is something that I can be free of. And I had never heard that before. And so when I heard that Sunday in August of 2000, when I heard those words that I could be born again, I accepted Jesus' invitation for a new life free of homosexuality.
Welcome back. Today, Linda Jernigan operates the ministry Rescuing Homosexuals, which comes out of her own experience leaving that lifestyle. And in part one, she talked with Greg Bogdan about always feeling different as a child. She now understands that this was in part because she was not raised by her biological parents, so she looked different, had a different name, and had different parents from her siblings. As she matured, however, the differences she felt from other women escalated.
You ended up living as a man for almost 20 years.
Yes.
Can you just describe that a bit?
Yes, what happened was...
Which, by the way, I've seen pictures, and I'm amazed.
Yes, I didn't do anything medically. I haven't had any injections throughout my entire life, no hormones, no pills, nor anything. But I was able to grow facial hair. I had a beard, light mustache. I was able to get a goatee and sideburns and different things like that. I only wore men clothes, men shoes, men jewelry, men cologne. I wore baseball caps backwards. I had a low haircut. I went to the barber shop basically every Saturday morning to get my hair cut just like all of the other men. And I lived my entire adult life until I got saved as a man.
Do you ever, during that time, did you ever feel confusion being born a woman, now living as a man, or did you feel very comfortable in that lifestyle?
I felt very comfortable in the lifestyle that I was living, but yes, I was tormented. And so just like as we may hear homosexuals say today, I would take the torment that I felt and I would say, I feel bad because Christians is making me feel bad because they won't accept me for who I really am. But internally, it wasn't society, it wasn't anything external. It was because in my heart, I really knew, because I said I was raised in church. I knew the Bible verses, I knew scriptures, I knew what God said about homosexuals, how they felt. And so I knew internally that I was living a life that wasn't pleasing, and it didn't bring any real fulfillment or joy into my life. And that's how come I had the alcohol and the drugs as my way of escape so that I could find a superficial joy or happiness or peace.
Now, you ended up meeting a woman that became pretty much a long-term partner with you as a lesbian. How did the two of you meet?
We met because she was a friend of mine. She was married to a friend of mine, and so their marriage dissolved. And so as their marriage dissolved, she and I just became close. They had 2 children. We were having fun and just hanging out and shopping while she was hurt and going through her divorce and things like that. And so after a period of time of being around each other, we began to develop romantic feelings for each other. She had never been involved with a woman before in her life. I had. And so she had not. She didn't identify as lesbian or gay or anything. She just said she simply fell in love with me. And so, and that's the woman that I ended up spending nearly 15 years in a relationship with.
Now, would you consider yourself happy at the time?
Well, superficially, I would say that, you know, I was happy. We had ups and downs because it was a relationship,
Right.
you know, two women living in the house together with two kids, you know, so we had issues and we had problems. But overall, I would say that there was a sense of happiness because we were working jobs and we were advancing, going to school. So it looked as if we were advancing in life, but she had a void and I had a void. So ultimately, we were just two very insecure women with low self-esteem, became codependent upon each other, and we equated that to love.
Right. Now, you ended up getting saved, and you were still together with her at the time?
Yes, I was. In fact, I was drinking and getting high and things like that. And so we moved from where we were living on the west side of Chicago, and she moved me to the south suburbs because she thought that if I would change my geographical location, that maybe that would help with my addictions. And we all know that when I moved to the south suburbs of Chicago, we all know changing your geographical location doesn't matter. And so as soon as I moved out there, I still had the same issues. And so a friend of her had invited her to church. And so she had been going to church for about a month. And so I went out one Saturday night. I told her I'd be right back. I didn't come back till 5 o'clock in the morning. When I walked back in the door, 5 o'clock in the morning, her expression on her face told me that she was going to leave me. And so I went in the room and I thought, what can I do? What can I do? And I decided she's been asking me to go to church with her. So I'm going to go to church with her today. And so I got up and I told her, hey, I'm going to church with you this morning. And I went to church with her that Sunday, and that's when I had an encounter with the Lord Jesus Christ.
Wow. During the time you were homosexual, was there ever a moment or moments when you, obviously growing up in the church, growing up with a church family around you, was there ever a time you went back to God and said, you know, God, what's all this about? Or went to him in regards to your homosexuality?
Yes, I used to talk to God very often. Especially when I was intoxicated. I would talk to God a lot and, you know, tell him, because I understood church. I understood that I was raised in the church.
Right.
So there was a part of me that did actually miss being part of the choir and coming to church and worshiping. And there was a part that really longed for that. But I knew that I couldn't have it on a genuine level because I had this issue. I was a homosexual, and when I walked through the door, the pastor was going to make sure that I knew that I was going to hell. And so I got tired of hearing about being an abomination and wicked and going to hell, so I stopped going to church. But I would talk to God very often and say, Lord, you know, I wouldn't mind being a Christian. I wouldn't mind coming to you. But I was born like this. You know, there's nothing I can really do about this. I wouldn't mind being a Christian. I want to have a relationship with you. But I have this issue. And that is the exact same dialogue that I had with him when I went to church that Sunday. And I was worshiping him that Sunday morning in that balcony. I had the exact same conversation with him that day that I had been having for many years. But this day, I heard him say something to me. You know, when I said, God, you know, I just feel like I was born this way, and there's nothing I can really do about it. He didn't tell me I wasn't born this way. He didn't tell me I had to change. What the words that I heard was, but you can be born again. And that was something that changed my whole worldview and my whole paradigm about this is not a sentence that I need to take to the grave with me. You know, this is something that I can be free of. And I had never heard that before. And so when I heard that Sunday in August of 2000, when I heard those words that I could be born again, I accepted Jesus' invitation for a new life free of homosexuality. I became a Christian because I understood that I was in a jam and I was making a complete mess of my life. You know, apart from homosexuality, you know, I was using drugs, I was drinking, I was smoking cigarettes, I had a horrible attitude, I was in and out of jail. You know, so I had a lot of other things that was going on that I recognized that I needed something beyond myself to help put the pieces of my life back together. And so I didn't become a Christian so that I can get out of homosexuality.
Right. Tell us a little bit about your ministry, Rescuing Homosexuals.
Yes, the ministry Rescuing Homosexuals is a ministry that does exactly what its title says. We rescue homosexuals. We create a platform where homosexuals can come and discuss their issues, where homosexuals can have people that can relate to their situations. I was a butch stud lesbian, and so there was things that I was going through that the church didn't have an answer for. You know, they didn't know how to tell me how to deal with the issue of should I wear a dress, or do I grow my hair long, or do I keep it short? You know, those are issues that homosexuals who were like me can come and talk to me about and say, hey, how did you transition? How did you do this? How do you transition when you leave the house where you two were cohabitating together at? And so Rescue Ministries addresses issues like that. It's just a safe haven for homosexuals who want to experience deliverance, but do it in a way that is not going to have their life destructive.
What encouragement would you have for anyone thinking about leaving the lifestyle?
Leave. I would encourage you to leave, you know, because it is my opinion, and my opinion is formed by talking to hundreds of thousands of homosexuals, reading their stories, reading the emails. It is my belief that homosexuality is something that is so tormenting, and it doesn't bring the peace. And that's why they look for external things like alcohol and drugs and multiple partners and things like that, because it's still this reaching and searching for something to fill that void. So I would encourage them, man, just leave, woman, just leave, because the peace and the hope and the joy and the satisfaction that you're looking for can only be found in Jesus. So leave ASAP.
Linda says that there are a lot of people like her who are leaving homosexuality every day. And you can find out more about Linda by going to the website rescuingministries.com. Now, as we go to a break, here's Linda with some thoughts about same-sex marriage and if it's a civil right.
It pains me to hear the African-American struggle be equated with same-sex marriage. I believe that it demeans and devalues what our ancestors and our forefathers went through. They were prejudged based on the color of their skin, which is something that they could not do anything about, not because of a behavior. And so with homosexuality and same-sex marriage, we're talking about a behavior. We are not talking about something that is a civil right. Civil right is something that cannot be changed. I am an African-American woman, as you stated. I'm African-American, I am a woman. And regardless of what I do, even if I have a sex change operation, my DNA is always going to confirm that I am an African-American woman. And so that is a civil right. My behavior was, many years ago, one who practiced homosexuality. I no longer practice that anymore. So that means that that is transformable. That is a transformable behavior, and it's not a civil right.